Fourth speaker, Tanya, is here to talk about generative AI.
Hi, thank you. What an amazing panel to be on, ants and AI job interviews, and it's great. Thank you. I'm an associate professor in media and cultural studies in media arts and humanities, and I'm currently conducting a project looking at the use of generative AI in PR and communications workplaces in the UK. There's numerous studies and research that highlights that in order to move away from the allure of the speculative threat and promises of AI, that we need to look at AI in context-specific locales. And although the landscape is changing fast, there is still a relative lack of knowledge as to why people use AI technologies, especially in specific contexts. So I'm kind of, this project is responding to calls to look at generative AI use in context-specific locations. So yeah, looking at PR and comms uses of generative text AI. Why? Well, there are, and I'm specifically looking at small and medium enterprises, so small writing agencies, marketers, communications, freelancers, those kind of subjects. So why? There are swathes of the UK sector in the PR sectors that are comprised of small to medium enterprises. There's a high likelihood that the texts that SME writers have helped to train, have helped train generative text AI tools. Unlike the New York Times, however, most of these companies have no power or, power to sue or take any kind of collective legal action. As the AI Summit Open Letter in 2023 highlighted, small businesses and artists are currently being squeezed out of communications and legislation to do with generative AI as big tech companies capture even more power and influence. And there's also mounting evidence that generative AI is being used in an increasing number of communications and PR content workplaces. And I'm kind of looking at what kind of questions we should be asking in terms of ethics and also literacy training and that kind of thing. So I've been working with a Brighton-based PR agency called Magenta Associates, and we have undertaken qualitative interviews and quantitative survey of writers in the PR and communication sectors. We had over 1,000 survey respondents, some of which were content writers and some of which are managers. 21 interviews so far. Some of the findings have been published in a white paper report called Cheat GPT. Not my title idea, unfortunately, but a great one. Echoing other research out there, we found that generative AI text tool use is widespread. There's around 70% of the market, of the industry are using it. And those that are using it are increasingly using it on a daily basis. Heather told us that I can't live without it now. And I think there's some interesting concepts and debates to be had around the fact that it's becoming like Google, right, in its everyday ubiquity. And so that, for me, changes how we might want to talk about artificial intelligence and think about general artificial intelligence as becoming a tool that is used in everyday life. Oh, my slides have a mind of their own. Hey.
By timings,
maybe. That's a shame. I'd like to look at the slides. Right. Oh, okay. Right, let me just read it really quickly so that I know what I'm saying. How are they using it? Right, okay, yes. So people are using it not as press are reporting to kind of churn out press-ready content. They are using it for kind of non-professionalized writing, more like emails, social media posts, some draft content. Everybody that's using it is editing it heavily or, very considerably before sending it out into the public realm. People are using it for rewriting text, suggesting structural headings, synthesizing notes, summarizing transcriptions. They're using it for idea generation, topic research, providing feedback, and to organize their day. And also people told me that they're using it as a kind of an assistant that never judges them, and a kind of sounding board. So loads of different uses. The idea that people are using it for topic research, I think, is really interesting, given its propensity for hallucination. It really isn't Google in terms of how it produces content, not knowledge, not kind of factual knowledge per se. So some interesting implications for using it for topic research by professional writers. What they're not using it for is to write. Most of the people that I interviewed, and this was reflected in survey data, are not using it to write content because they don't like the style. It was described as being shallow and repetitive, very floaty, and people told me that they prefer to use their own style and language. They are professional content writers after all. This is kind of what they got into the job for. So mostly people are using it to make their workplaces more efficient rather than to kind of enhance creativity, although there were people using it for creative means, mostly idea generation rather than writing in itself. There were very differing cultures of transparency among different workplaces. So most people were telling their co-workers, or at least someone else, only 20% telling their line managers, and 8% telling nobody. So even though it was a small number of people who weren't telling anyone, these kind of outliers are significant nonetheless, because they revealed this sort of sense that they were ashamed to be using it. People telling me in the surveys especially that it gives them, they feel like it's giving the impression that they're lazy and the work isn't theirs, so they're worried about telling people. And this goes against, again, press reporting that's kind of framing secretive use of generative text AI as a kind of neoliberal weapon against each other. People aren't using it to get the competitive edge, they're more using it because they're ashamed and don't know how to talk about it. There were kind of most people, there was lots of evidence to suggest in the surveys that people are concerned about the legalities of using generative text AI. And these are also reflected in the interview data. And IP breaches came up quite a lot. I thought it was interesting that most writers that I spoke to and managers are more concerned about breaching other people's IP than these text tools breaching their IP. So like how we're talking about ethics right now is like assuming that these big tech companies are using, these are ethical tools and their use is unethical. But actually we can question the kind of ethics at the level of IP protection, that these small companies should be protecting their own IP, not just worrying about other people's. And we are 8 minutes, sorry. Guidelines and training would be useful. And so I'm kind of thinking about critical algorithmic literacy as a way to help SME writers understand the unequal distribution of algorithmic power between local and global stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And it feels quite similar to what's happening in academia in some ways. Like content creation isn't even our primary focus. Yeah. So one question back with from Andy.
I was going to comment very similar to Jamie. I just wondered what you thought, how much these issues overlap with the students using AI tools.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm marking, and noticing similar trends. So one of the things I didn't really kind of emphasize here, and one of the things I'm working with the PR companies to do, is reframe the importance of subjective knowledge. So like authentic, and I use that term always in quote marks, but like this idea that you can get authentic authorship by reframing the human subject as a source of authority rather than data. So moving, again, as other people have said, we've got this real trust in these systems to produce objective scientific data, right, and objective knowledge. And actually, what I would say is that in marking as well, I'm glad to say that still the best essays are the ones that are producing originality of thought. They are grounded in a certain kind of form of subjective knowledge, situated knowledge, as Haraway would talk about it. So lots of parallels. I'm not going to say that I don't think that students shouldn't use it, because it's a tool that's coming. I do think seeing it as a tool that is like Google, that is going to be increasingly normalized, is more helpful than kind of outright bans right now. But yeah, massive problems, right? Yeah.
There's a question here and at the back, and then Thomas, if you've got time.
Thank you. Tanya, you mentioned about efficiency in the survey there, and I was wondering if you've looked at in your study at all, or if there's any future plans to actually kind of monitor how much time people do use, because I'm always slightly suspicious that people think a tool is helping their time, but are they actually spending more time like learning the tool, putting things back and forth in it, rather than sort of just doing that thinking in their head? So I was wondering if that's part of your study or not.
It's a really good question, because they're changing so fast at the moment. People's responses, I think, are going to change very quickly. But yeah, there were people reporting that they weren't using it because it was taking too much time. Depends on the task. So for transcriptions, amazing, right? People were like, there was no contest that they were way more efficient. Other things like editing what it had written was a thing that was a real time suck. Because some of it, like they said, they don't actually like the content it produces. So editing its written content was the one that came up.
Sort of on that subject, you were talking about, these being professionals who are hired for their skills to do this. I wonder if there's any way to differentiate between different generations or people in different parts of their careers with this. And thinking about a generation of, we have digital natives now, of perhaps AI natives, and what we might be able to see or glean from thinking about that question.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't made any, we didn't do age collection, so I'm not going to make any kind of generalizable claims. We did have quite a few survey respondents talk about their age as like a contributing factor. It tends to be about other people's use, though, when they say, I'm worried about the young people. I'm worried about those entering the job market. I'm fine. And then like even the new starters were like, I'm fine, but I'm worried about those in 2 years' time. So there's this speculation that it's going to hurt other people, but it's less about, people who are actually working in their own use. So, and like the digital natives thing is, there's some research, right, that kind of suggests that it's a slightly problematic way of framing new use. So yeah, it's a difficult one. Thank you.
More questions? We've actually got time left for lunch for accuracy, so if anyone has any questions.
Well, we've got one more speaker, right?
Do we?
Yeah.
We have one more talk.
Well, you've got time for this.
I squeeze in my question anyway. Did you ask people whether they thought it should be declared that they use generative AI?
Yeah, we did. And that's one thing. I mean, so most people think it's ethical, but that kind of reflects because in that most people are using it. So that's an unsurprising finding.
They would actually declare when they put that out,
yeah.
This was done with this tool. Or
right now, no, people aren't doing it as a general rule. Some of the managers that I've been talking to are doing it, and there's no industry-wide guidelines as yet as to whether people should be declaring it or not. So it was really varied in terms of declarations. Lots of people just very ambivalent, and not sure what to do. So training and guidelines I think are needed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for reminding me that there's actually one more talk. That was really